and welcome to session 3 of this consultative webinar on data and knowledge production, organized by Shastra Deemed University in association with AIU New Delhi. In fact, in the morning, we had 2 sessions which were very informative, and all the speakers, they have done a lot of justice to the topic with which they were assigned. And with the same spirit and enthusiasm, we are now opening the 3rd session on the sub-theme, Digital Paradigms in Education and Training using Data and Knowledge. And this session, again, we have a very good set of speakers. We have 3 very eminent speakers with a very good experience both in academia as well as industry. We have Shri Vengusami Ramasamy, the head TCS ION, and we have Mr. Rajesh Kumar, the co-founder of FACE, and we have Dr. Rajan Saxena, former Vice Chancellor, NMIMS, former Director, IIM Indore. And this session will be moderated by Professor S. Vaidya Subramaniam, the Vice Chancellor of Shastra Deemed University. Before we get into the session, let me take the privilege of introducing the speakers of this session to the audience. First, let me introduce Mr. Vengusami Ramasamy, alias Swami, who globally heads TCS ION Platform Solutions, specifically addressing the needs of assessment, learning, and business process operations. Swami was instrumental in setting up the unit and driving the domain solutions relevant to several industries, including education, manufacturing, and recruitment goals. Swami also heads Tata Business Hub as director, which is a digital B2B platform set up by Tata Group. Swami has held important positions, including managing the largest customer relationship GE for TCS. With an abiding interest in modern software quality methods, he also headed the process consulting group. A Six Sigma Master Black Belt, Swami has an exponent of new ways to quality. Swami holds a master's degree in computer applications from Madras University. And we are very happy to welcome you, sir, to this session.
Thank you, Doctor.
Let me also have the pleasure to introduce another eminent speaker of this session, Mr. Rajesh Kumar, who is a serial entrepreneur. And he has co-founded multiple EdTech ventures that offers a range of services from work-integrated degree programs to aspiring students by partnering with leading universities and tech enterprises to career development solutions to graduating students. All the ventures put together enable over 1 million students every year on their journey towards better jobs and career. Very good jobs, sir. Rajesh believes in the limitless possibilities of students if skilled and guided suitably. He devotes his free time to mentoring EdTech startups. He is an alumnus of IIM Kozhikode and PSG Technology, College of Technology, Coimbatore, and also a recipient of Distinguished Alumnus Award from both his alma maters. Welcome you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor.
And we have a great academician and an experienced administrator as our 3rd speaker, Dr. Rajan Saxena, who is an institution builder, marketing academic, and an author in marketing, corporate strategy, institution building, and leadership. He held the position of Vice Chancellor of NMIMS, Deemed University, Mumbai. And prior to this, he held the position of Director, IIM Indore, IBS Gurgaon, and SP Jain Institute of Management Studies. Dr. Saxena is a very committed researcher and has also published over 80 articles and 24 cases in national and international journals. And he has written 2 books on marketing management and international marketing. He has advised leading multinational as well as Indian companies in the areas of branding, marketing strategy, and organization structures and leadership. And he has also trained over 20,000 executives in India, Sri Lanka, and Cameroon. We are really honored with your presence, Professor, and welcome to this particular session. And this session, as I told you earlier, will be moderated by Professor S. Vaidya-Subramaniam, the Vice Chancellor of Shastra Deemed University. And over to you, the moderator, Professor S. Vaidya-Subramaniam. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Selva Bhaskar, for the fine introductions. And thank you, speakers, for agreeing to be a part of this panel discussion, which is predominantly on the emerging paradigm of phygital education. And I'm extremely happy to share with the audience that what we have today by way of panelists is a very rich combination of speakers who will be wearing multiple hats. Mr. Swami can actually talk the language of academics, though he is in business. Dr. Rajan Saxena can talk the language of business, though he is into serious academics. And Mr. Rajesh Kumar, he has been a distinguished alumnus in both of his alma maters, so he understands what it needs to be a good student, and then being a serial entrepreneur himself knows what it takes to taste those initial success stories. So this very good blend of speakers is an ideal choice to talk about a blended form of education. And that is the direction in which we are seeing the entire momentum towards higher education is building. We might curse COVID for the loss it has caused to humanity. But on the other hand, it has opened opportunities which hitherto people were dismissing it without a reasonable basis for the same. But now we see that there is a lot of traffic, both at the policy level and at the functional level, towards finding an alternate medium, not as a substitute, but a supporting element that can fix the problems that confront both extremes of higher education. The pure play online education, which is driven by the bits and bytes, and on the other side, the conventional education in brick and mortar institutions. Now this gap is getting reduced with the presence of platforms, business aggregates, and other service providers who have very innovatively put in place products or services that addresses the value deficit in these extremes and reduce the space between both these forms of education. Not to the extent that one will completely replace the other, but this phygital medium is using the best of the physical form and the digital form, and that is why it is very rightly named the phygital way of taking higher education. Now let me begin this panel discussion by first inviting Mr. Swami, followed by Mr. Rajesh, and then Dr. Rajan Saxena, to offer their opening remarks on what, according to them, is their understanding of phygital education from three perspectives. One, the status quo, how they understand what others understand. Secondly, what is it actually? And we will reserve the third part for the follow-up question. We'll just stop with the first two. What is your understanding of what others understand what phygital education is, and what is it actually? Mr. Swami.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Vaidya. Pleasure to be in front of all of you and all the audiences as well. wherever you are all. Hope you are all safe. Fantastic topic to talk about. And again, picking up from what you mentioned, we all know when we studied, we all know education to be a physical mechanism or an approach structure. We never did online education at that point in time. As he rightly said, one of the silver linings of the pandemic itself is it forced to think digital in addition to being physical. So what happened when this whole pandemic started? Everybody said, no, there is no way you can go to a college. You need to figure out a mechanism, and innovation flourished. Everybody accepted that there is a mechanism to still learn, and they all moved digital. We strongly believe it is not this way or that way. There is something in the middle, as we all call it as phygital today, which is a very intelligent layering of both physical capabilities and the digital capabilities in a very appropriate fashion. And I want to reflect back. Take a youth who comes and joins a higher education institution, and let us reflect the youth going out of the institution and joins the industry in two different perspectives. One, as maybe in three different perspectives. One, as he prepares himself to come and join the higher education institution. Two, as he prepares within the higher education institution. Third, as he joins when he gets out of the higher education institution and joins an industry or prepares to start an organization like Rajesh has done. Look at it in these three dimensions and look at what is physical and what is digital as we see it today. And we can always think about what could be the possibility later in this conversation. Yes.
Did we lose Mr. Swami?
What is learn as I enter into an higher education institution, right? And typically you can call this as counseling or whichever approach.
Seems to be
have a good under his strengths and the interest areas. He needs to have a deeper understanding of the careers in the industry. He needs to have a quick view on the demand in the industry. And he needs to know what are the gaps that he has in order to succeed in the industry itself. Now, when he does it, then he is prepared to jump into the higher education ecosystem to prepare himself for the future. Now, all these four areas, he can do it digital, he can do it physical. We all know career counseling as someone face-to-face guiding the candidate on what is good for him. And we all know today, it's being completely digital, where the counselor may be sitting in one part of the world and the candidate is in another part of the world. But lots of opportunities are emerging in the career counseling phase, which is phygital in nature, where one gets an immersive experience of the careers and hence makes a right decision on what to learn itself. Let us move on to the second stage, where he is actually into the higher education ecosystem. Now, we all know the brick and mortar campus that a student goes, learns from the professors during his 4 or 3 years of his higher education, gets enormous amount of skills not just from an academic perspective, but in the co-curricular area, how to communicate with friends, how to deal with different scenarios, all came in a physical model. And suddenly we got thrown into a digital model, and many of these areas became gaps. And a large number of new things emerged. Learning without learning, learning through games, multiple pedagogical structures. I don't think we would have got all of them without a view on phygital or physical plus digital in that, right? And the third one is in the assessment space. As we all know, digital and physical are coming together. Students today have an option to take partially from home in a digital model, partially in his campus in a physical model, and that's emerging, and that's a change that we see it. And as the student goes into a enterprise or an industry, again, the industry is now not just looking at digital education, not just looking at physical education. A combination is what an industry prefers. And as TCS, we are looking for people not just to have a physical education, but gain the speed and the scale using digital, but gain the depth using physical. And that's the change that we see. So education is fast moving into a phygital. There are significant opportunities that are opening up. I believe the future will be phygital, and the phygital will dictate and will open up a lot more opportunities on all dimensions as we see it from here today. Back to you, Dr. Vaidya.
Yeah, thank you very much, Swami. The key takeaway is the speed and scale is definitely getting digital, and the depth requires physical, and we will still spend some time on that in the next round. Mr. Rajesh, your views on what is phygital education and how are you preparing?
Sure, absolutely. Firstly, Dr. Vaidya, thank you so much for the opportunity to be part of this August gathering. Indeed, a privilege and honor. And I'll probably have the benefit of being the youngest in the cohort to also probably reflect my views more, like you rightly called out in the opening remark about me being more of a student and from that perspective itself. So my view about higher education goes like this. Higher education is supposed to prepare any individual for the world, whether he's doing a job, whether he's doing entrepreneurship, any of those public service related and all of those things. Two critical things go on to constitute somebody's success in that. Is the person curious enough? Is the person responsible enough? So in my view, higher education is supposed to provide for these two things. Make somebody, an individual, curious and responsible. Drive enough of these two, he or she would be able to become very, very robust in whatever their approach is, whether it is deep diving into their academic pursuits or skilling pursuits, or like how Mr. Swami talked about the third aspect, which is about getting into the enterprise, working there and all of those things. Now, when I think phygital, in all honesty, our experience of having worked with about 1,500 plus universities over the last 12 years as an entrepreneur, digital was a very, very hard to accept sort of a thing. And like how Dr. Vaidya rightly pointed, over the last 18 months, that's become a norm. It is almost as though somebody just, wiped out the entire physical prospect at all. And that led to universities and academia force adopting to digital itself. Of course, there has been some learning and all of those things as we went along. But where I'm coming from is for an industry, if I were to probably speak freely, which is largely based or had all of its basis on a physical thing only. This last 18 months has been a rude shock of sorts, from scrambling to do exams and assessments to conduct of sessions through Microsoft Teams or debating between Zoom or any of those things. There's been a rude shock out to the whole thing. But all those things, shattering and everything, if we were to say reflect back in terms of what has that done to education leaders and what I believe could potentially be the way forward, ties back to my context of what I said about higher education itself leading to making every individual curious and responsible. In a very crude manner, if I were to draw a parallel, Being responsible is about meeting people, shouldering activities. What does college give us? I'm sure all of us in our own yesteryears, in various stages and forms, we will attribute a lot of our character building to all the activities that we do. Physical activities itself, like clubs, hosting events, conducting seminars, soliciting sponsorships, to constructing everything. Like the physicality of it cannot be taken away. The digital aspect of it, or the curiosity aspect of it. If you look at it, I've been a quizzer all through my life, up until I finished my college, of course, and after that, there's limited revenues. What kindles curiosity to participate in quizzes is also the excitement around knowing newer and newer things. With the advent of digital, what has also happened is barriers to access have been completely shattered. Now, in terms of wanting to know, maybe about 5-7 years back, or even 10 years back, when we started, Googling was not such a common thing. Now, today, even a 5th standard, my kid is about 6.5 years old. He talks about that. We are living in a time and age where we're dealing with digital natives who are our customers in higher education itself, where they have absolutely no restriction whatsoever around access to information itself. So from that perspective, when I come in, if these two are core key constructs of what higher education is supposed to constitute, the combination of physical and digital, or the phygital as it has been come to be known as, can go hand in hand and make phenomenal impact in terms of overall success for our customers, with our students and all of those things. I would address my initial remark with that, and hope listen to others and then take further participation, please.
Thank you, Rajesh. And now to Dr. Rajan Saxena. As an end user, being an academic running educational institutions, Rajesh said, moving from forced adoption to normal adoption now. Now, what is phygital education as somebody who normally adopted it in formal ways?
Thank you very much, Dr. Vaidya Subramaniam, for this invite, and also for it's indeed a privilege to be part of a very distinguished panel over here, discussing an area today which is redefining, I would say, the learning landscape. Today, the day when we are understanding that we can no more now see education from different lenses itself. For example, online education and the face-to-face education. No more can we really see them as two separate buckets, as we have been seeing it. If I were to fall back on my own experience, I remember that typically the resistance of the faculty to go online in a business school, for example, was very high, because it was considered as an inferior product. And as a consequence of which, these were two different kinds of products that the institution was offering. But the world has moved. And especially during the COVID period, when everything just moved over to an online education, and we have seen what disastrous consequences were there of a completely an online education, because there was certain kind of inherent problems which we never realized. For example, in our country, or in many of the emerging countries, the problem has been that of the infrastructure. We see the problems with regard to the digital connectivity. We have seen the low bandwidths as being a very real problem. Right now, though I'm joining you from Mumbai, I'm not too very sure that at what time the internet connectivity suddenly becomes unstable. So we aren't really what I call it as the infrastructure-wise. We are not really so very comfortable, and as a consequence of which, there have been learning outcomes which have been very, very inferior kind of learning outcomes. In fact, UNESCO itself has talked about an inferior learning outcomes and the learning failures that have occurred in this whole process. As we reopen, the answer is in terms of what is it that we can really do face-to-face or in an online kind of thing. My mind today says, and I'm pretty convinced, that it is not an either-or situation as was very rightly said by Mr. Swami. And if we look at it as a parallel to what I'm really saying from the industry, e-commerce and physical retail both exist. Both have the same products. The customer shifts from one to another in a seamless kind of a manner, is able to access the product or a solution in a 24/7 kind of a model. Now, the same thing is today there when we are really talking about it in the context of the phygital education. So I call it this phygital education as my understanding. People talk about hybrid education. No, to me, it is not hybrid. In a hybrid, we are still talking about the difference which is there. In a phygital, what we're talking about is the blending. You are blending the online and face-to-face education together, such that at the end of the day, there's only one path which is there: engaged and immersive learning experience. How do I create an engaged and an immersive learning experience? That is you talked about speed and scale. Yes, the criticality from an education point of view is how do I create an immersive and an engaged learning experience? And which is where I think the phygital comes in, which is where the blending comes in. What part of it? Everything is available in a digital mode. Everything is available in a face-to-face kind of a model. As we look at today, the best part that's happened with the digital technology is that the individual customer, the individual user, has become far more empowered. So I can really now decide what is it that I want and at what price do I really want, and from where I want. I can do that. In a similar manner, we are seeing students becoming far more empowered. If you look at the data consumption, if you were to just look at the data consumption in the last 1 or 2 years, you'll be surprised at the exponential rate at which the data consumption has really been there in this country. Not just merely the text, but also the visual, or for that matter, let us say, the rest of the other kind. So the format is immaterial, but the data consumption has really increased. But though the data consumption has happened, but has that really led towards a knowledge creation? Which is where, again, one has to really start asking that what is the limitation of the digital technology? Does the digital technology help me to build in knowledge? Or is the digital technology only helping me to provide the information and the sources of knowledge are really giving me that? It's a physical part which is really giving me that kind of a connectivity.
Yeah.
The second big part that I want to really say over here, and I'll possibly tell you also as we really move forward, some of our NMIMS experiences that we have had in this kind of a part, not now, but back in 2018, when we really started by integrating a couple of online courses in our engineering programs itself alongside.
In fact, I'm going to come to that in the second part.
Yeah. So you're going to come to that. So I'll just put it across. There are 3 I's that I think become important for us as we really start creating a phygital learning experience. The first I relates to the immediacy. That is, as and when the student wants it, the learning should be available, the course should be available, the lecture should be available. Whatever that is there, at any time that I'm wanting, anywhere. Now, which is where that we are saying that it is not just real time, but also in an offline kind of a mode, it should be available. And therefore, it has to become channel agnostic. It has to become, and therefore it is both asynchronous and synchronous technologies. And I have Swami and Rajesh who are there from the tech world. I don't have to be really talking quite a lot about it, but the fact is, in terms of the immediacy, which is important. The second is emotion. Is it really helping me to get the student to immerse in the data? Is it leading me to, is it leading the student towards a journey of discovery, which is the core of learning? And the last is interactivity. How is the technology what kind of a humanization of technology are we really? How are we humanizing the technology? And which is where the physical part also comes in and the digital part also comes in. I'll stop over here.
Yeah.
But I would then take up maybe the next kind of a multiple points that may emerge from what I just said. So to me, phygital is blending. It is like a typical cocktail or a mocktail. You know, when it isn't just a blender that makes a difference.
Yeah.
But it is the bartender, is a skill that becomes important. The person who is making a mocktail, that becomes important.
True.
So that's where I think we are going to be looking at.
True. I'm glad that, on the opening remarks, there is harmony amongst all the three panelists, to the extent that everybody agrees that it is a blend of both the physical and the digital ecosystem. So we made a good start. Now, having made this start, picking from where Dr. Rajan Saxena left, how do we ensure that it is going to be immersive and experiential, where the in-depth learning is necessary? And that's very concerning given the fact that there is a lot of analysis that forces us to come to a conclusion that the output of the higher education is not as productive as it should be. Now, is it because of that lack of immersive and experiential education, even in its physical form? Let's assume that yes, it is because of that. Then, in the last few years, that as a provider of digital education, Mr. Swami, how have you addressed this immersive and experiential part so that it addresses the pressing concern of graduates with certain deficit in that direction?
So you're on mute.
Yeah, thank you. So it's a brilliant question. We need to think about two important aspects. If I have to summarize only two key aspects. If you want to have phygital education going forward, and if you want to have a successful phygital education, and it should have all the characteristics that Dr. Rajan Saxena talked about, the immediacy, the immersive, the interactiveness, and in typical tech language, we call it as anytime, anywhere, any device, multiple A's. There are two important things that has to happen. One, there has to be a very strong ecosystem integration with the higher education institution in a very seamless fashion. And what I mean by the ecosystem integration, I believe there are 5 ecosystems that has to come together. One, at the core, is the academic institution itself. I don't think the campus boundaries will disappear. The campus boundaries can fade, but there is a campus that is required in order to pull it together, and that physicality cannot be removed. So the first ecosystem partner who is pulling all these things together in the higher education ecosystem is the academic institution itself. The second one is the industry, the entrepreneurs, the corporates, whichever way you want to call that together. The phygital education has a big participation requirement from the industry itself, and it cannot be on an event basis. It has to be on a continuous basis. It cannot be that industry and the academic institution meets once in a quarter, once in a year. It does not happen. It has to be a very smooth flow of knowledge between the industry. And you look at the Western world for a minute, you will see lots of gains they had when the industry very smoothly got integrated with the academic institution. And I believe that is the phygitality is required in this space. The third ecosystem partner to me is the original equipment providers or the original software companies or the original technology companies, whichever way you want to call that as, right? And they need to play a very critical role, because they are going to drive the relevance of education as the youth comes out of the ecosystem itself. Otherwise, it does not become relevant. Today, as TCS, we always have a challenge in terms of taking a student who is coming out of the higher education institution and make him relevant as the shortest possible time within the industry ecosystem. And that means that both industry ecosystem as well as the technology provider ecosystem has to come together. And it could be a Siemens, it could be a Google, it could be any of the other providers who are coming together with the higher education institution. The fourth one is what I call as learning and practice centers. This concept is very similar to what we have in online education as study centers. Now, education as credible higher education institutions cannot go to every district in this country, cannot go to every city in this country. So you need a model where the academic institution are smaller in number, very credible, high quality, but you need these learning and practice centers in every district of this country that integrates with the academic institution seamlessly, that makes the education scalable, reaches to every district of our country, but without compromising on the quality and the physical requirements for the last mile for the student community itself. So that's very important. And I call this as a learning and practice ecosystem. The last one is the content ecosystem. And one should not forget the new pedagogical structures today requires a very different type of content. And it is not just a professor teaching in a classroom alone, because now you can create a lot of magic, because technology-driven content is changing the way one can address the custom requirements for various different type of learners. So one is this 5 ecosystem: academic, industry, the original tech or equipment, people who manufacture them, the learning and practice centers, and the content providers itself. The second one is about new pedagogical structures for physical education. The current pedagogical structures are not necessarily going to be complete in this physical education, and hence this is a great opportunity for higher education institutions to work together to create new pedagogical structures. And it could be an immersive game-based learning, it could be a physical hands-on based learning, it could be a industry specialization-based courses, and so on and so forth. That brings a very different dimension for physical education. So I would recommend these 2 things, Dr. Vaidya.
Thank you very much. In fact, you are leading me to the question that I reserved for Rajesh. I know that you are trying to experiment with a new phenomenon that broadly touches the second part Mr. Swami addressed, on how we can customize the industry relevant programs, and you are taking the risk of doing it in an engineering education ecosystem. And that's where many people, feel that there is a lot of friction if you want to create some positive disruption in engineering education. Now, what do you want to share through this medium, the plan that you have to address the issue that Swami has raised?
Right, sir. Very pertinent, right? So for most parts, in our personal experience, and what we're trying to do also is something what a lot of academic leaders as well as enterprise owners, technology folks and industry leaders that we interact with, in close quarters, everybody seems to be accepting it, sir, in terms of how, as academia, we need to make experience more relevant. So for most parts, as academicians, as universities, we are used to stressing a lot on knowledge aspects, a lot on skilling aspects, and the gap traditionally usually comes in terms of experience aspects. When it comes to the enterprise, for most parts, they value the experience much more. And that is why if you look at our students' resumes, we talk about internships. That is the closest that they get in terms of internship, experience itself and all of those things. Now, from a phygital ecosystem perspective, I think this is a wonderful and a brilliant opportunity where what we are doing is whatever Mr. Swami mentioned in terms of the construct. I wouldn't want to repeat whatever he said, but just taking a leaf from that, if as formal education providers, we are able to beautifully dovetail all the aspects that are expected from the industry from an experience building perspective, at the same time without compromising the purity and the integrity of what we can do from an academic construct perspective. So if you look at it, sir, sirs and ma'am who are on the audience as well, I'm sure they're all notable academic leaders. For most parts, we take pride in the purity of what we provide from a foundational skilling aspect as academic heads and academic leaders, which is very important. For every student who is going through our portal, foundational aspects are very important. And at whatever point we end up being at loggerheads with industry in terms of, your changes are so whimsical, you keep changing so fast. Fortunately or unfortunately, I've had the privilege of being at the exact cusp of both industry and academia, and hence I can take on both sides and when I present these points. So it is so much more always a pull and push between both industry and academia. And having seen both, I believe the current opportunity and the scenario that is playing out is beautiful to the point where we can absolutely cater to what the industry wants. In that sense, without compromising on any of the academic integrity and the foundational aspects that we want to cultivate in any student. Now, from a construct perspective and also from an actual delivery perspective, the last 18 months of doing things digitally, both from an industry perspective as well as from an academia perspective. For most parts, if you look at it, almost every enterprise used to be very fussy about wanting our students for internships also on campus. Right? Until pre-pandemic, it was like you need to necessarily be in a Chennai or a Bangalore or a whichever campus. They had a lot of these constraints about the infrastructure and the safety of their own data, and all of those things was what largely prevented. And for many reasons, because of this hard constraint, we were not able to do or even explore any blended programs at all, right? Maybe Professor Saxena's experience, some of those MBA programs, it might have happened where they are doing some moonlighting and part-time work and consulting projects and all of those things. But otherwise, education at large has never actually dabbled with any blending of work or experience into the university construct itself. These are very discrete, disjoint things. Academia happens for 15, 16, 18 weeks a semester, and then internships or work experience or apprenticeship happens post that. But now in the new world that we are all beautifully have been able to embrace, work has also become digital. And that brings in a completely new dimension from an overall fulfillment of students' development itself. The experience that we talk about, which is what everybody seems to be raving about, and which is what every enterprise appreciates maximum, and all of those things, we have a very real possibility of being able to bring it into a regular academic construct. We can be very imaginative about it. I'm not suggesting or doing what we are proposing to do at our enterprise, but for most parts, at least the possibilities are limitless. And all it takes is a little bit of imagination, little bit of creativity. And we have the support of enterprises also from being able to I'll probably go on a leg and say that, it's not just about, for most parts, enterprises, organizations look at student support more like I'm not sure if I'm sounding harsh, charity, where what they say that I'm providing you an internship, it's an opportunity. I will rather go in and say that if we are able to integrate all of these aspects into our academic thing, we can rather be tilt the equation to a much more balanced situation and say that, we are providing top class human resources, which can potentially augment your growth, your trajectory as an enterprise, and balance the entire power equation today. Today, for most parts, universities are at the behest of how the whims and fancies in some way or the other of large and mighty enterprises, but we can balance it out. And with the phygital possibilities, I mean to say, that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah. So, I can perfectly understand now that you're just trying to reposition the levers of control and balance to the higher education ecosystem, where there is an autogenous model of internships within the campus itself, and which is likely to happen as we move forward. Now, if that is possible at the engineering education level, and usually being a management student myself, we usually have this thinking that it's relatively easy to do in a B school. And that's what NMIMS did even before the pandemic. And that's what Professor Saxena wanted to share. So if you can just quickly share what happened before the pandemic, and has your effort actually multiplied because of the pandemic, and now that you're better off?
Well, prior to pandemic, and this is something that I would like to put it across, that we were in our engineering school and also in our management school, we were getting the feedback that the world was changing, and therefore Industry 4.0 was really where we were really getting this whole kind of a feedback on what are the kind of skills that we need to be developing. We did not really have faculty, for example, in the area of artificial intelligence, as an example, and not many, and it isn't just mainly NMIMS, but perhaps many institutions in this country don't have that kind of faculty strength. Whether this was artificial intelligence, this was in the area of IoT, or this was in the area of cloud or machine learning, or any of those areas that the industry has been, for which, let us say, the industry was coming forward to recruit our students. One thing which was also emerging, and I think it is important for us to note, that a company like TCS, for example, which had been on our campus, recruiting many students from the engineering school, or Infosys, for example, I mean, the typical mass recruiters, as I've often said, we found that, well, they weren't there because from an institution like us, they were expecting some higher order skills. And when, let us say, the HR lead was with us from Infosys and from TCS, they really talked about this part of it. And as we were really exploring, and we had created a kind of program in the area of data sciences, but then the question was, where was the faculty? And we were really stuck, which is where I think when we started looking at Coursera, and Coursera really came across and talked about a partnership. But my biggest concern with Coursera was that, look, I don't want to go the MOOC way. I don't want the courses to be just coming in our institution and leave the student there for him to be deciding as to what is it that he has done. I have no way of checking as to what the student has done, which is where a kind of a more blended approach really emerged. In 18, I'm talking about it. And what was that? That the faculty and the students went in for, let us say, a course on artificial intelligence. But then both of them, they were doing the same course. We required them to really get the credits from Coursera. But in addition to that, it was the faculty that designed the project. And much of that project was really working on a real life problem, whether this was from Amazon, or it was from, let us say, Flipkart, or it was from, let us say, Book My Show, or from anywhere that we are talking about it, the digital work itself. And that project was assessed by the faculty, which is where the physical part comes in. The second part was that it wasn't just a project. There was a whole lot of problems that were picked up. And we asked the students to design a solution, which would be based on what they were really learning. So that this is where, again, the faculty and the digital models were there. What we realized at the end of it was that these are students who really graduated with these kinds of courses were found far more ready for employment, for placement, and they were able to command a much better salaries than those who just had a conventional BTech kind of a degree. This success took us into the business school, and on a similar kind of alliance, the same kind of things we started experimenting in the business school. I believe that over a period of time, the relationship with Coursera has only expanded in not just mainly the engineering school now, but also in others. Now, not just mainly now Coursera, but the learning that we have had today has really led us towards thinking that can we now take, for example, our BBA programs our BCom honors programs, or let us say our economics programs, and many of the others in an online mode with the support from coming in from the industry itself. As an example, why is it that the economics graduate should not be doing an artificial intelligence course simultaneously? Why is it that he should not be solving, let us say, a problem which is relating to the customer preference and the pricing problem after looking at, let us say, the data that is today emerging, the customer data that is coming in, the customer life cycle kind of a data which may be coming in from various kinds of sources itself. So as a consequence of which, what we realized was that the moment this was happening, the student was far more employable than what the student was in an earlier kind of an era itself. My as kind of a reading of the education system today is that many of the institutions, especially some who are able to really move it forward, move the, I would say, the mouse forward, this is going to be happening much more frequently. I'll use one more part, and which is what Swami was referring to. And I think conventionally, we as academicians, we have very, I would say, zealously guarded our boundaries. The fact is that the knowledge today is not getting created by zealously, let us say, guarding our boundaries. It is actually making our boundaries much more fungible. The academic, what the technology world is telling us, makes the entire discipline far more fungible. And when the fungibility comes in, there's a much better kind of a knowledge that gets created. As an education system, as an education institution, it is we who have the responsibility to create knowledge. And that can happen when, let us say, the industry and academia work together, for example, or for that matter, let us say, social sciences and technology work in the same manner, or the humanities and technology coming together. I'm able to do that. The knowledge is created at the intersection. It is not in the purity of the discipline itself. It is that kind of it, and which is where I think the phygital part comes in. It takes us into.
Yeah.
And today, the student is empowered today, and that's why I think that today the day when co-creation is possible, the co-creation, a whole lot of creativity today is far more possible.
Yeah.
And customization can really happen. This is something which was not possible in a conventional face-to-face kind of education itself. So NMIMS has really gained significantly, if I were to look at it, right from 2018 onwards. Until that time period, we were treating technology in a different way. And last year, in 2020, you said online is going to be a platform because the digitalization was really happening. So many of the programs got onto the digital part. But as we now open up, as the institution opens up, let's see what happens.
Yep.
But I've been telling the current Vice Chancellor and others that you look at it from a phygital kind of point.
Yeah. Now, that again leads to a follow-up question with Mr. Swami, is because once we again open up, then we are back to normal forms of education, and I have the fear that we will still have those issues of quality showing its face. Now you represent an organization that told the world that you can build quality in along with a mechanism that you successfully scaled at globally competitive levels. Your winners of the Malcolm Baldrige Award, the software service quality that you have in your products and services for other verticals and other business applications. How can we reinforce that for the purpose of education? Now, the scale is there, the speed is there. You've said it's becoming the norm, but consistency in quality, how will you build that?
Great question. See, we have to recognize the fact that in just a couple of years, the global data volume is going to go beyond 150 zettabytes. Zeta is 10 to the power of 21. So that's the question that we need to ask is, are we going to take advantage of this or not? Yeah. This is humongous amount of data. Are we going to take advantage of this? If the academic institution and the ecosystem goes back to a fully physical model, then we lost it. And that's where academic institution along with the industry and all the other ecosystem partners that I talked about need to sit and ask, what is this blend going to be? What is going to be done digitally or online? What is going to be done physically in the campus or in the learning and practice centers? That's a very critical decision that we all need to make. There is enormous amount of data in the past 2 years that we have that we can leverage it. So my view is this is going to be a blended model where the physical component will be offered by the higher education institutions, and they will leverage, in other words, every data point that is going to come can be used in order to improve the quality of what happens in the campus.
Yeah, but Mr. Swami, but Mr. Swami, is that sustainable? That quality excellence must be consistent and sustainable. Is that possible?
Absolutely. I believe if we find a mechanism to leverage the data that is going to come from the digital models in order to improve the quality in a consistent fashion. And I'll give you a very simple example. Every learner in your campus has got certain amazing set of capabilities. But we need to recognize some may be very good in learning from videos. Some may be very good in learning by doing. Some may be very good in learning by reading. These are various different type of youth that you will find in your own campus. If we understand that behavior of the individual, of the youth, using digital models, using data, and leverage it in order to augment it with physical capabilities, I believe we can do it at scale. I believe we can do it consistently, and I believe we can do it with highest levels of quality.
Yeah. And another question has just popped up from the audience box. Since you told about the tons of data we are generating, and we also have a responsibility towards being conscious to the demands that we put on our environment and other resources. Now, how energy friendly is online education going to be, or phygital education going to be, in terms of the energy efficiency? If it is online data, server, power, the associated demands on resources, how are we going to handle it?
For one, I strongly believe every domain is constantly thinking about what is their next frontier. As we are all thinking about phygital education, obviously it puts a lot more demand on infrastructure. It puts a lot more, how is this internet going to support such a phygital education, for example? Today, we are not talking about Wi-Fi, we are talking about Li-Fi. And one says that if you stand below a street light of Dubai, you can download 200 movies in sub-fraction of a second. And that is the next frontier in Wi-Fi to Li-Fi, right? In a similar way, if you look at the organizations that are dealing with power, organizations that are dealing with infrastructure, is thinking about what is the next generation of power going to be? What are the alternate sources of power going to be? So we need to have that faith that as we think about next frontier in education, the power industry is going to think about next frontier there. The internet industry is going to think about the next frontier there. And when we all bring this together, every one of these industries will move forward, as I see.
Okay. And another audience question to Dr. Saxena, because since you also dabble with policies, now if this is going to happen and the rate at which this will happen moving forward, is it also going to increase the scores when you look at it from an equitable access? Because the demands of digital education is also higher. Now, from the SDG goals, already we are now confronted with a problem where many are outside the education ecosystem. The first challenge is to bring them back, and then to make them conveniently migrate into the digital form. So there is actually two challenges. Is that going to cause a damage to the equitable access that UNESCO and those policy makers are also worried about? So that's the question.
That's a good question, I must say that. I think the biggest challenge that we have today is, as you very rightly said, how do we bring the student back to the education system itself? Those who have really moved away, and perhaps many of them have moved away perhaps permanently itself, not because of multiple reasons. Either there's nobody in their family to support them now, or for that matter, let us say they have lost their job, or whatever be the reasons that are there. I'll not go into that part. This is where I think both the government and the institution will have to think about it. Whether this is from the point of view of the pricing, or it is from the point of view of non-price incentives that one is going to be working out with. It's not going to be an easy answer for that. And especially when we talk about it at the school level, as an example, at the school level. I mean, Tamil Nadu, for example, the state where you are right now. You know, the midday meal has been a very, very important motivator for the girl child to come in and to come to the school. With COVID and with the schools closed, this midday meal was just not available. So therefore, the girls really dropped out. Not only girls, even the boys dropped out, many of them. So my point of view is that as government will have to think, and the institution will have to think, what is it that we can really do? Whether this is in the form of scholarship support, it is in the form of giving some devices free, which is important, or it is from the point of view of giving them access to the bandwidth, which is there, Wi-Fi, which is there at this point of time, at a low prices that are there, or free of cost to them. Or for that matter, let us say, giving them work opportunities, especially, work on campus, for example, will be important. That means, in other words, one has to think now more in a holistic manner, so as to bring the students who have been on the margin, who have been thrown out of the education system in the last couple of months, because of COVID. I think we'll have to start thinking about it. Institutions and government will have to think about it.
Yeah.
It's not just merely one who is going to be doing that.
Yeah, definitely.
The second big part, I think, which is important, is to look at it from the point of view of what kind of connectivity institution is able to build with the district level functional authorities, district level industry authorities. Is there a possibility that the students would be able to do some work at the district level? As an example, each state has a district plan. Now, when you really do an audit, you find that there are some industries that haven't been doing as well as, let us say, the others have done in the district plan. Multiple reasons. Either the skills are not available, or let us say the technology has become obsolete, or for that matter, let us say they don't have an access to marketing part of it. Multiple reasons that are there. My work in the area of district planning in Madhya Pradesh, for example, when I was a director plan, IIM, was in terms of looking at, we found that, for example, there were areas which are very good from a leather production point of view, but that was really, or leather goods production point of view, but that was really missing out. So we found that there is a need to now connect with that at district level. Institutions, we have large majority of institutions today, not just mainly in the metro cities, fortunately, but spread across the country. 1,000 universities, not necessarily only in metro cities, smaller cities, at the district headquarter level. Even NEP is talking about it from the point of view of the MERU, the multiple, or let's say the multidisciplinary universities in each district itself.
Yep.
I think that kind of a connectivity is important.
Essential.
Once that gets developed, employability gets generated, student feels more motivated to be able to come. The parents would feel more motivated to send their children. That's what I think.
Yeah. So thank you, Professor Saxena. So that brings the session to the last question, and that's to Rajesh. Now, both Mr. Swami and Dr. Saxena, I mean, they have exhibited very high levels of positivism. And the positivism that oozes out from the phygital mode, that's going to be the way forward. Now, assume that, the policy in place, the resources are in place, access is there to information through data and everything. Professor Fadke from IIT Bombay used to say, if access is that important, then the librarians in all universities would be the most intelligent people in the world, because they have access to all types of resources in a single building. Now, if that's the tendency of a learner, the last question to you, how do we morally, socially, incentivize learners to embrace into this digital system? Because this morning we had sessions on how to incentivize teachers, how to motivate them to adopt this. But over a period, people will say that, learners' demands are increasing, the learner attributes are changing and all of that. Ultimately, they also need some push from somewhere. If you are going to be a student again, where would you want the push to come from?
Right, sir. In fact, I was anticipating a question on these lines only, given the whole narration, how we've been following through the whole thing. So let's just understand some foundational things, sir. Any student who gets enrolled in higher education, we are still a sub 30% gross enrollment ratio country, right? So practically whoever is coming into our higher education system has sufficient means and also motivation driven by their parents. So it's not like on day one, a kid who comes and signs up for a college thinks that, I'm going to fool around my next 3 years or 4 years to not do anything meaningful in life. That's not the case. More often than not, they kind of tend to lose track on account of a few things. My own personal experience, and also we train on average about 1 million students every year on a variety of things. What we see is, first and foremostly, what is my immediate gratification about doing an activity or a task? In a traditional scheme of things, if you look at what are the things which captures people's attention maximum, games, binge watching, all of those things, they have a very innate native loop that get constructed into it because there is instant gratification. Now, if I have to draw parallel from that into my B school education days at IMK or whatever other things that we've been doing all these while, if we are able to modularize every lesson plan to everything and conclude it with some very tangible recognition. I'm not meaning to say that, for every attending a lecture session, give them a credit or something, but something on those lines. Because at the end of the day, including while most of us talk about how our younger generation is very instant gratification, we ourselves are also like that. That is why that's a reflection of whatever we see in any of these digital platform adoption and all of those things, right? So rather than looking at this as a negative, if we can construct our academic plans and everything towards an instant gratification so that there is immediate recognition. So it's not that a grade or anything will make or break the whole thing, but from a recognition that, the student is learning something and he's getting acknowledged for that quantum of effort that he's putting. That will be one very significant thing that will move the needle substantially. Second, in terms of continuity, if I go back and see, there are always favorite professors that we have from our good old days. Why do we find them favorite? It's not about they providing an additional extra bit of knowledge or anything like that, right? They're just more considerate. They're just much more resonate and sync with us as students. And in a phygital world, that is so much more feasible. Where I'm coming from is in the last, 18 months, it has all been digital. We have very absolute track of who attended, how much they attended. We're able to capture responses at the blink of an eye. Previously, even the best of faculty wouldn't be able to know whether the 60th student in the class is actually paying attention or not. But today we can do that. In that context and sense, if from a course or a program administration perspective, if we are able to leverage the digital aspect of it substantially, I'm sure there are commercially available so many of those tech out there which can help us. If we put that to practice and we align our academic colleagues to be able to embracing these changes in a way and manner so that they're able to pay more attention to the student. Just a very simple fact. If you're able to pay attention to the student and use digital to be able to, like, say, seamlessly do that, even once campuses reopen and all of those things happen, I think we would have substantially conquered. So it's not about a push or a nudge. We can beautifully co-create an ecosystem with the student where it's a cauldron of a lot of ideas and everything utopian that we aspire for from a university perspective. Okay. Give them recognition for whatever that they're doing, every student, and also pay enough attention from a construct perspective or build ecosystem in such a way using digital or technology so that the attention of the student or the faculty is on every student, which makes them feel important and special and wanting, so that he or she is continuing in the right way of learning and everything.
Thank you. Just have time for one quick question. The next session is at 3:30. So I'll just ask one quick question to Mr. Swami and a shorter answer also. Now, this part we have, addressed the issue of education for employment, degree, outcome, and all of that. Two things. How does Phygital encourage creativity? One. Second, will it stop students leaving India for higher education? Can Phygital retain talent in India? That's a huge saving to the foreign exchequer.
So I just want to pick up from what Rajesh mentioned, and as he was talking, it just struck me that digital gives a great opportunity for us to motivate or reward or recognize the candidate or the student in a physical way. So if you know the behavior of the student in a digital world, you can use that effectively in your physical world, in your campus, in order to reward the student. But let me answer that question. I believe that physical plus digital is going to open up a lot more avenues, which was hitherto not seen by the candidate. And hence he sees that the other side is always green. Now, what this is going to do for our country, as I see it, is it is going to open up a lot more things which he didn't see till date, right? And when he sees this, today, the reverse brain drain, as we call, people see opportunities in India, people see the scale in India, people see the creativity opportunities in India. And that's exactly the reason you see every day a unicorn coming up in this country. And I believe it will help, Phygital will help in order to retain our best talent within our country.
Thank you very much with that positive viewpoint. Yes, Professor Saxena.
No, just one little point, and just 1 minute.
Please make it very short. Yeah.
Just very good. Just 1 minute. We have all along talked about the student, right? But actually the one who will be able to enable this whole education is the faculty. Now, we haven't really paid any attention to that. I think there's a need to now, build the faculty's capabilities also for a phygital education. That, I think, is a kind of an area where the investment must really be made by the government and also by the institution.
Yeah, true, very true, very true. So with that sound of harmonious positivism, I think we'll bring an end to this session. It has been a wonderful session. And there is no doubt that the way forward through digital education is clearly going to make the country not only an exporter of its own form of education, but also ensure that no child is left behind in his or her pursuit of seeking knowledge. With this, I request Dr. Selva Bhaskar to wrap up.
Thank you very much, sir. In fact, as you rightly mentioned, we had a very good deliberation, and I think this would definitely add a lot of value to this particular webinar on this particular theme. All the speakers, starting from Mr. Sami to Rajesh to Dr. Rajan Saxena, all of them have really done justice to the topic which we have assigned. And indeed, it was a very interesting deliberation that we had. Thank you very much, all the speakers. You have taken your time and participated in this webinar. In fact, this has made this webinar a very interesting one. I have a lot of audience reaction on YouTube that everyone is saying that very informative and exciting, and they look forward to the outcome of this particular webinar. Thank you once again, and my thanks to the moderator, Professor S. Vaidya Subramanian, for completing this within the time frame. Thank you very much, and we have the next session probably in the next 5 minutes. So once again, I thank all the speakers. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Namaskar, madam. Dr. Selva Bhaskar, you'll have to check Dr. Kannan and Professor Srinivas.
Dr. Kannan has joined, sir.
Yeah, Professor Srinivas is also there. So since we are all here,
All of you, yes.
Namaskar.
Namaskar, sir. Namaskar. You, as the session coordinator, you decide when to start. Any housekeeping announcement? I think we have already shared those emails.
Yes, sir.
So if you are ready with live, we are all ready. Can we assume that we are all ready, ma'am? And
yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes.
So Dr. Selva Bhaskar, it's up to you. You have to take
Yes, sir.
live.
Yes, we can start the sessions. Yes. So welcome to the final session of today's webinar on data and knowledge production. In fact, in the last 3 sessions, we had very purposeful and meaningful deliberations, and we are quite happy with the way the speakers have contributed. And now, this 4th session, I would say, is a very important session, because we are going to discuss a lot of things with reference to India as the session theme goes, Indian Knowledge and Data Systems. And we have three eminent speakers who have really worked in this particular field for decades together and have very great experience and expertise to share their knowledge on this particular theme specifically. We have with us Dr. Sudha Seshayan, the Vice Chancellor of Tamil Nadu MGR Medical University. We have Professor Srinivasa Varagedi, Vice Chancellor, Kavi Kulaguru Kalidasa Sanskrit University, Ramtek. And we also have one of our esteemed colleagues, Professor N. Kannan, Head Department of Oriental Studies, Shastra Deemed University. And this session will be moderated by Professor S. Vaidya Subramaniam, Vice Chancellor, Shastra Deemed University. And to start with, let me have the pleasure of welcoming all of you to this particular session. And for the audience sake, let me introduce all the speakers. To start with, let me take the pleasure of introducing Madam Dr. Sudha Seshayan. Dr. Sudha Seshayan is currently the Vice Chancellor of Tamil Nadu Dr. MGR Medical University. Being a veteran doctor and brilliant orator, Dr. Sudha Seshayan is a dynamic woman who has mastered varied roles with ease. She pursued her bachelor's degree in public administration from Osmania University and hospital administration from Annamalai University. She became a civil surgeon at the age of 30. She is part of the international editorial board that published the revised edition of Gray's Anatomy. She takes credit for being the first publishing editor of the translated version of Encyclopedia Britannica in Tamil. Her write-ups in popular Tamil magazines on various spiritually oriented subjects are much sought after, and some of them, such as Devara Tiruvula, have been successfully published as books too. Her career growth has been steady, and today she is the Vice Chancellor of Tamil Nadu, Dr. MGR Medical University. We welcome you, Madam, to this particular session, and we are really honored by your presence.
Thank you very much.
Let me also take privilege and pride in introducing another speaker who has a lot of eminence in this particular field, Dr. Srinivasa Varagedi, who is currently the Vice Chancellor of Kavi Kulaguru Kalidasa Sanskrit University at Ramtek, Maharashtra. He has served at different capacities across the country, and formerly he was a director of Sanskrit Academy, a research institute funded by Rashtriya Sanskrit Sansthan, Osmania University, Hyderabad. He was educated in Vedic Shastras in the traditional Gurukula system, and he completed his doctoral research. And computational linguistics is his area of research. He has held significant positions for several years at various capacities across organizations. And he has created several scholarly articles, and he has guided several scholars both at MPhil and PhD level. Sir, we are really honored by your presence, and we welcome you to this session.
Thank you very much. Namaskar.
Thank you, sir. I also take the pride and privilege of introducing one of our esteemed colleagues, Dr. N. Kannan, Professor of Mathematics and Head Department of Oriental Studies and Research, Shastra Deemed University. At present, he is guiding 8 scholars, and they are doing research across various disciplines like Agama, Arthashastra, mathematics, and he is a person who has got a lot of interest in Vedas, and he is fondly known as Vedic Kannan among the Shastra fraternity. He is with us today and he is going to share his ideas and knowledge on this particular subject. Sir, welcome to this particular session. We are really honored by your presence.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
And as I mentioned earlier, this session will be moderated by Professor S. Vaidya Subramaniam, Vice Chancellor of Shastra Deemed University. And sir, over to you for the proceedings.
Thank you very much, Dr. Selva Bhaskar, for laying down the platform for the last session, but in my personal view, the most important session. As I said in the inaugural session this morning, that the theme for this webinar, data and knowledge production, has a particular purpose. And the purpose for this session is unique in the sense that it kind of traces with a reverse trajectory as to how the knowledge supremacy of India is now at the crossroads of ensuring a scientific and empirical validation mechanism through various data sources. And hence, this session is a renaissance attempt to position India as a knowledge superpower or the Vishwa Guru and restore its past glory. And that is why we would aim to understand the leadership position of India in the knowledge space through its various forms of learning in the past, which has actually maintained a continuum over a period of time. And I have often marveled, as many would, how is that this form of education, which has been the civilizational asset of our country, and a form of education that is undateable, attempts have been made to actually fix a date to the civilizational asset of our country. And so far, I don't think anybody has come conclusively with data that this civilizational asset actually originated at this point of time. It is undateable. And how that the multitude forms of knowledge, be it Ayurveda or Ganita or astronomy or metallurgy or medicine or computer science as we call it today, they have continued to survive. And there is some unique mechanism that transmits this forms of knowledge to various generations that has always been a fascinating subject of study for many researchers. And that is why very rightly, the policymakers have also evolved an Indian knowledge system as a policy vehicle to unravel and position the supremacy of India's knowledge warehouse to the entire world. And to help in this effort, in this direction, we are extremely happy to have three distinguished resource persons for this panel discussion. And I'm sure, they will navigate this panel discussion without the need for me to exchange any pre-discussion points. And that is why I did not even send them an email as to how this session is going to pan out. The other reason is I myself, I am a student insofar as this session is concerned, and I dare not tell them that these are the questions that will actually be the broad contours of this panel discussion. But I leave it to them. But I thought I will just lay down the broad contours, beginning with Professor Srinivas, whose opening remarks I thought can be on the government's initiative through the IKS, what it actually plans to do. And then Dr. Sudha Seshayan, who is actually a very erudite scholar who can talk on any subject, but I would request her to just in her opening remarks, tell us how the data and knowledge as we see in its current form is going to address the SDG goals from a limited perspective of healthcare and environmental impact. And our own Dr. Kannan, I will come to you as to how you find that there is already a lot of treasure that just requires a little bit of decoding. And with this as a broad contour, we will just take the session forward as we receive questions. So let me begin the session by requesting Professor Srinivas Varakhedi to just give us a quick overview of what this IKS policy is going to do from the data and knowledge production perspective. Professor Srinivas.
Thank you very much, Dr. Subramanian, for your very broad introduction about the entire panel discussion. You have rightly said that this discussion will set a background for all of our future actions. Yes, the first question is, what is the initiative that is taken by the entire Indian population? Instead of, I would say, this is not government move. So the entire Indian elite fraternity really wanted this for long. And today we have really started. In that sense, NEP 2020 is not an initiative of the government, but it is an initiative of Indian mind. The second point, so in continuation of in NEP 2020, what we want to achieve in order to position the Indian knowledge systems in mainstream education. Why I am saying mainstream education? So far, the Indian knowledge tradition, either it was at home or it was in the marginalized alternative education system. Let me see, when the Britishers came in India and they started their own education system, they found that there was a strong roots of education system in India. But they wanted to push this to the side, one side. Therefore, they created new Sanskrit universities and central new Sanskrit colleges. For them, they gave a huge funding and they said, you keep on doing this and don't enter into mainstream education. That was the first step they took to keep the education outside the mainstream education. It was a planned program. And later, even now, after independence of India, we are looking at the IKS as an alternative, or whoever want to explore, they can do so, but it is not at all available in mainstream education. Today, the major concern is that this IKS, Indian knowledge system, whatever we call Indian knowledge tradition, should be part of our life. Therefore, should be part of our mainstream education. This is first objective. The secondly, the knowledge that today, when we want to define Indian knowledge systems, a thought comes to my mind that either it is studied as part of our history program. That means, as we say, Indian knowledge means it is ancient and it is somewhere available in some Sanskrit texts or in tribal knowledge systems. Therefore, we never look into this as a part of our life. Most of the times, when I see even in NEP, it is focused as passive knowledge that has become that has come to the light now. It's a passive knowledge. That means everyone knows about it, no one can use it, right? So the point I want to make it is, we from Indian knowledge tradition system want to make it active knowledge, to bring the active knowledge. That means it should be in digested form. Therefore, everyone uses it without knowledge about it. You don't know about Indian knowledge system, but yet you can use it. So to connect the knowledge with the future. That is the whole goal. Not to connect the knowledge with the past. When you explore knowledge, if you go to the past, that is not useful. When you explore knowledge, if you can create your future, that is the real knowledge. So IKS is intended to be connected to the future, with the future. This is first point I want to make. Therefore, very initial remarks, 2 points I want to make here. One is what IKS. It is not at all an ancient one. It is knowledge in practice and knowledge that drives the life. Okay. The second point, why? To make ourselves Atmanirbhar. This is what I want to make. This is the statement that I want to make. The third point, how, which is very important. How to access this knowledge database? This is big question, because it is available in a language that we have lost, that we have forgotten. That is one crucial concern that we have. The second point is methodology that we do not practice. So in order to bring the knowledge accessible, we need to bring back the methodology and the language, which has become a barrier now. With this introduction, I close my initial remarks. You can later take discussion.
Thank you. I will revisit those two statements you have made. So there is a follow-up question. So we will take it in the second round. Now to Dr. Sudha Seshayan. The modern data, modern knowledge, modern ways of pursuing new knowledge has a considerable strain on the resources that are available. Now, how has this been addressed by our ancient knowledge systems? And as I said in my opening statement, this is where we think you should educate us as to how these types of demands on natural resources were very naturally addressed in our ancient form of education.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vaidya. And without wasting much time, let me get into the answer that you're seeking. I'll restrict myself at the outset, let me tell you, to the healthcare system, the medical sciences, and related area.
Yes.
The IKS, or whatever we call it, whatever name we call it, was more natural. And nature was not countered. That was the health system or the healthcare system that IKS subscribed to. I would like to quote an example, not from the medical area or the health sciences area, but then from the civil engineering perspective. I'm not sure if everyone in the audience is aware of the construction called Kallanai by Karikal Chodan. Kallanai has withstood the test of time. And if you notice, if you take an aerial view of the Kallanai, you will find it is not a dam which is constructed just across the river. Whenever we say a dam or an anecut, the idea that comes to one's mind is that it's some kind of a construction which puts a barricade to the flowing river and stops there and harnesses the energy. If you have an aerial view of the Kallanai, you will find it's kind of the entire structure is parallel to one of the banks of the river. In other words, it captures the force which comes along the river and channelizes it, not being counterproductive, not kind of restricting the force. If you go against the river force, you lose all your energy and efforts in combating the force and not gaining anything. Now, this is the principle that was used by the ancient healers, ancient healthcare professionals, be it the Ayurveda system or the Siddha system or whichever system of Indian medicine as we call it. But what came from the West, it is a kind of, counteraction to something which is happening inside the body. But we do have a problem now. I'll not go into the details of what the modern medicine is and what the Ayurveda system is. All that is already known. But the essential problem that we face today is that all these ancient methods have not been subjected to the research that today's world requires. I would take the COVID itself as an example. The entire world faced the COVID situation. And most of us in the state of Tamil Nadu and many of us in the country of India know that several of these Indian medicine concoctions and formulations were able to give at least 80% of the population a kind of a relief. But then there is no proof as would be required by Western science. There is no kind of proof. We are not able to put these concoctions into the kind of scientific research that is already been kind of notified. So my take here would be, yes, on one side, we would have to go into research, which will subject all these things into the already notified kind of research. But then we should also remember Western research modules may not completely fit the Indian systems of medicine. So there is a necessity to develop newer research modules. You cannot just like that take something and put it in the beaker and then kind of, shake it and look for the calorimeter or the calorimetric test. There is a necessity to devise newer methods of research, accept what the truth is, and go by that. At the same time, let us also remember the Indian health professionals, the ancient professionals, were aware and were much, much modern to their times. Permit me to read a small stanza from the Sakteya Grantha, which is supposed to have been penned by Dhanvantri. The Sakteya Grantha's passage is like this. Denu Stanya Masurika, Naranamcha Masurika, Tajjalam Bahumulascha, Sastratena Grihitavan, Bahumulacha Sastrani, Raktolpatti Karani cha Tajjalam, Rekta Militam, Spotaka Jwara Sambhavam. Freely translated, you know what this passage talks about? It says, take the liquid from the cow's udder, take it to the bahumulam or the shoulder area of the individual, make a small cut there and put in that fluid, and you should go so deep that there should be at least a few drops of blood coming out. Once you do that, after some time, you find the individual going in for a rise in temperature, there will be fever, and then the immunity will start developing. Now, this is supposed to be from the Sakteya Grantha, as you rightly said, the date of which is much, much, much earlier to Edward Jenner, who practiced it, the same methodology of inoculation from the cowpox pustules. Now, the reason I'm quoting this is, yes, there are certain areas which will fit into the Western system of research. But then there are certain areas which will not, where the Indian system looks at the individual as a whole and not as pieces of organs or organ systems. So that is the change that we require. And I suppose IKS can make this change. So with that, I'll close the opening remarks and let's proceed with the discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Madam. You have actually laid down the platform for the second round where I have the follow-up questions. And just picking a thread from where you left, Dr. Kannan, I know you are also actively researching on various other dimensions of how the ancient knowledge is actually used knowingly or unknowingly. In fact, when we, our engineering school, we actually have a US patent on a simple practice that we follow in our household chores. The pulley column that we actually, for the benefit of others in the audience, the Rangoli, as you might know it, but the pulley column is a pattern that we generate, and we decorate the entrance of our house using that style and pattern. So each day, you know, they come out with new patterns, and it is only those who actually do it know where to start, how to traverse, and where to end. Now this we thought we can use to transmit information, especially sensitive information, pack information in this pattern, send it, and then send the style to the end user who can decode it. And this was used in secure transmission of sensitive information, to which, you know, we have a US patent for defense purposes. Likewise, Dr. Kannan, I mean, you said, you know, you have been working on various other dimensions using our ancient wisdom. Well, this is a practice, this is an art. Can you share any one of the ancient Vedic text that strikes a very profound modern relevance?
Thank you, sir. UNESCO proclaimed the tradition of Vedic chant a masterpiece of the oral and intangible heritage of humanity on November 7, 2008. So I begin with a Vedic chant. Devi Vacha Majanayanta Deva Tam Vishwarupa Pasavo Vadanti Sana Mandre Shamur Chanduha Nadhe Nurvagasmanu Pasustutaitu. Annas and cat wants to lick and clear the milky ocean in 10 minutes. So in 10 minutes or 5 minutes, I am in the position of the cat only, bringing the greatness and vastness of our Indian knowledge. These are the words of Kamban. And a layman wants to cross the ocean with a small country boat. Kalidasa says in Raghuvamsham, Titir Shugudustaram Mohat Udupe Nasmi Sagaram. Anyway, I will confine 2 points: ancient coding system with applications and modern science in ancient scriptures, giving examples. And Vedic scholars adopted a different but more convenient system of letter notation for numbers called Katapayadi or Vedic numerical code. So they divided the consonants into 4 groups. One beginning with Ka, second with Ta, third with Pa, last with Ya. So they assigned numbers, running numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and 0 for Ka, Kha, Ga, Gha, Nya, Cha, Cha, Ja, Ja, Nya. And similarly for the second group, Ta, Tha, Da, Dha, Na, Ta, Tha, Da, Dha, Na, 1 to 9 and 0. Third group, Pa, Pha, Bha, Bha, Ma, 1 to 5. Last group, Yara, La, Ba, Sha, Sha, Saha, 1 to 8. So using this, Sri Vedanta Desika has given clue to decode all Vedic mantras. I'll give a small example. You take the opening stanza of Rig Veda. Agnimihile purohitam yajnasya deva mritvijam hotaharam ratnadhatabam. Sri Vedanta Desika says in Subhakshita Nivi, see the corners and decode the letters. You will get the big number, 4-digit number. A is decoded as 0. All vowels are assigned the number 0. Agnimihile purohitam. Tam is decoded as 6. And now with the second line, the last one, see the 2 banks. Hotaharam. Ho is decoded as 8. Ratnadhata. Mam is decoded as 5. So Dakshina Uttara Vritti Nam Drishtihi Papanivartani. He gives a clue. So north to south, south to north and circular. Then we get the number 6580, which is called the Saros cycle of Chaldeans. We are attributing this number to Chaldeans. If you divide this by 365, you will get 18 and 10 as the remainder. So 6,580 is in the opening stanza of Rig Veda. This is called Gavamayanam. So if the eclipses of one Saros cycle were calculated, then they will be repeated the same invariable order for all the successive Saros. So in Vedas, they have designed this for the daily observation of the movements of the sun and the moon, even in the opening stanza. This is only a ripple in a great ocean. Then I take an example of a night tour from Sri Vedanta Deshika's works. Laplace posed, the great mathematician Laplace posed a problem some 350 years back. Take a chessboard and you know the movement of a knight.
Professor Kannan, the second example, we will reserve it for the second round. Opening remarks, we will restrict for the first 5 minutes. So I have a quick follow-up question to Professor Varakedi. You had very clearly said that, you know, IKS is actually an instrumentality to connect with the future. Now, the challenge for the higher education or education ecosystem in general is that the future learners are also getting very modernized, and their attributes towards education is also changing a lot. Now, how will you address this challenge of the future generation of learners who have a different perspective of education and the ancient knowledge which through IKS wants to connect with the future? So there is a challenge in this. How can we address the challenge?
Yes, really, you have challenged me with this question. Two things I would like to put forth to the young learners. One good thing that has happened in India is the idea of education. So earlier people used to think that education is for creating meaning, creating living. So everyone has to get a job, some or the other job. And the second point that people got to know that education should be for life, because all our Vivekananda says, and all Aurobindo says, and all our rishis claim that education should be meant for life. So ultimately, people came to a conclusion that education must be for life and living. But now, today, the younger generation learners are looking for more than that. What is that? That is what I understood with the interactions with the young minds, that making life and living meaningful. We want to add meaning to it. That's where people stand. So even you get living anyway, you get life, but if both of them lose their meaning, then there's no meaning. Therefore, people want to add meaning. So their Indian knowledge system will be of your help. That is first claim I make. Because you can really give a meaning to your life and meaning to your living. So that is first claim. How that I come to later. Another point, even you were to make the earth better space for living, and that is all is dependent on innovation. So we want to continuously innovate. So the last 2 millennia, if we see the history, the country which has maintained its tradition has innovated. That means tradition for innovation. You come to the tradition for innovation. If you want to innovate, all innovations are dependent on the bija, seed. That seed is available here. Otherwise, without seed, you cannot create krishi. You cannot make krishi. Krishi is not possible. So with these 2 points, I would like to say that as it is pointed out by Professor Kannan, lots of ideas are there. But those ideas may not be fascinating to the youngsters. Why? Because they don't connect with their life. You may have in your life or in your internal knowledge system lots of things. One thing that is not verifiable, because that has become in such a way that it is not verifiable. If it is verifiable, then how to do that? So if these two things, if we achieve, one point Sudha Madam has she spoke well on one point. There I want to add one thing. The parameters of evaluation in India have been totally different. And why we are not evaluating them with their own parameters? And we are bringing the parameters from outside and then evaluating them. We say that this is not worth for persuasion. Therefore, all these three aspects we have to educate our young minds. Then possibly it will be acceptable to the young minds. Otherwise, not.
Thank you very much. Actually, you have made my follow-up question relatively easier. In fact, Dr. Sudha was very emphatic on the need to validate the ancient practice, and the examples that she chose were from healthcare. And of course, in today's modern demands, anything that is not empirically and scientifically validated is actually not taken very seriously. But on the other hand, we as experts in IKS or various other forms of ancient knowledge know for sure that these are working realities. Now, as Professor Varakedi prompted, why should we always rest on certain existing practices for scientific validation? I'm just, I'm just asking this question because India and China put together represent more than, almost 1/3 of humanity. And the amount of knowledge, also the products that come out of that, for example, Ayurveda. There were times where the West raised a question on presence of heavy metal elements and the toxicity levels that are associated with heavy metals in Ayurvedic formulations. Now that kind of dented the amount of Ayurvedic exports that India could have made. But that was challenged in the scientific world, that the presence of heavy metals in Ayurvedic formulations is very much within the allowable limits. So we challenged that. Likewise, are we in a position to rest on these ancient knowledge assets and challenge the models that are used for scientific validation and come out with our own models? Because this is a webinar after which we will submit a report to UNESCO. If you want to write a report and give to UNESCO, what alternate models that suits the Indian scenario would you recommend?
Is this a question to me, Dr. Vaidya?
Yes, madam, because you said, yes, scientific validation is necessary. But then Professor Varakedi questions, why should we adopt the Western model? Then can we, as a response, give an Indian model for validation?
Yes. Dr. Vaidya, my answer to this is very clear. There are areas where we need to take the existing Western models, and there are areas where we have to design our own new models. We should kind of, have an open mind and take both. Let me quote certain examples. You were talking about Ayurveda principles and drugs. How many of us know that most of the expectorants, the cough syrups, as we call them, which are available in the market, do have many of the Indian herbs and the derivatives of the Indian herbs? These Indian herbs have been used by almost all generations of the Indian population. Maybe you and me also have used it. The grandmothers and the grandfathers have given us certain small bits of these herbs and have told us, keep them in your mouth when you feel like coughing. But then these herbs are picked up. The derivatives are, the phytocomponents are taken out, and these phytocomponents are used. Now, why I said we require both the models is because of this. On one side, there are certain areas where we are not very sure of what has been given down to us. Let me give a very clear example. I'm not trying to intimidate someone. I'm not trying to find fault with any system, but then this is a fact that we need to face. In the Siddha or the Ayurveda preparations, the ancient literature that's available says, take so much of the root of this particular herb, the root of herb number 2, the bark of herb number 3. Now, we're not very sure as to where exactly was this herb grown. I say this because the same plant which is grown in a hilly area will be slightly different from the plant which is grown in the plains. The weight of the root would vary, the weight of the bark would vary, the thickness of the bark would vary. And we just say, take so much, a handful. This handful, when it is grown in the Podigai hills, might be a concentrate, but then when the same thing grown in a kind of arid area or a very dry area may not even have the phytocomponent at all. So that is where we require standardization and validation. What exactly do we need to take or do we need to mix up? That is where we require the kind of scientific calibration which is being practiced by the Western world. This is 1. 2, there are misinterpretations of the language. Dr. Srinivas, right at the beginning, said the language will have to be properly relearned and taken into use now. I'll give you one very small example. Those of you who are familiar with Tamil will understand it better. There is something called the Ada Todai. There is a herb by name Ada Todai. The common interpretation, the modern interpretation as we call it today, if you see many of the textbooks, people say, idu aadu todada ilai. Aadu toda, ada todai. So they say it is aadu toda. I've read it in some of the textbooks. I'm amazed. The original description for Ada Todai is, those days the language was, when you say Toda, it meant Todu. Ada Todai meant the Ada will go to this particular plant and take out the leaves, pull out the leaves and start eating because there are some symptoms of disease. The animals have a natural kind of, healing property. They go and tend, even if you notice the dogs go and pick up certain grass, certain herbs when they are not well. So this is a gross misinterpretation of what is being given there. And point number 3, we have not tried researching into required areas. Now, in the Sangam literature, there are any number of instances where it is said, if you use the juice of the fig stem or the fig bark, the injury will heal without a scar. Have we tried this? Have we gone into taking out the fig juice and have we done some proper research to find out if it really heals? We have not done that. So these are areas which are lacking. And I think putting IKS into implementation, we would have to take all this in wholesome and start working out our own models. Of course, there will be certain models which are already available in the Western world. Let's take them, but then devise our own models for wholesome research.
Yeah, thank you, madam. That has again another follow-up question, which we will take it when we move to the next round. Dr. Kannan. Yes,
Dr.
sir.
Subramanian, should I add something here?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. Madam has really pointed out very interesting, brought out very interesting ideas. There, I would like to add just one point that as we know that there is a gap between Prayoga and Shastra, science and its practice. That gap has been created for long. somewhere we have to reduce it. But we have lost the practical aspects and parameters of evaluation, etc. during this period. Therefore, when I researched Indian sciences, Indian knowledge systems, two sorts of ideas I got. One is approximation. For example, in some places you don't need exact calculations. Why you need? For example, in Jyotisha, to calculate tithi, they don't really bring a lot of exactness. But for calculation of eclipses, grahana, definitely you need the exact calculation with the point of the land. Otherwise you can't get it. So therefore, for general purposes, to observe the tithis, to know the days and days, one need not have exact calculation. Therefore, keeping the purpose in our mind, we need to develop a kind of, it has been developed in India, that sort of mechanism. For example, Panini's idea of, when he defines the language, he goes with approximation because language keeps changing. So he never tries to create a definition of exact definition. But if you go to Sankhya model or Nyaya model, where they will give exact definition, but they try to give the exact definition because the word does not change. So therefore, according to the nature of the world and purpose, we have our own system of approximation and exact calculations. We need to adopt them in order to really show the results in a proper way. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. In fact, that's also going to be a point where we will revisit in the next round. And Dr. Kannan, I asked Professor Varakeri the challenges because of the generation of learners that we are encountering on a day-to-day basis. Gen Y, that why is actually because they are always asking the question why for everything that we teach. So it is actually WHY. Now, you wanted to explain the chessboard. Now, suppose if I were to teach Laplace transform to my students. Now, the challenge is how do we blend modern learners with ancient wisdom? How will we use that?
Sir, before that, I want to answer that question.
Yeah.
Everything, all truths cannot be validated through science because it is said that there are more things on heaven and earth, Horatio, that are dreamt of in our philosophy. Even Shakespeare said. Vedas means, Vedas show the way which are not known to the material world. Pratyakshena animityava yastupayo na buddhyate. Yenam vidanti vedena tasmat vedasya vedata. That cannot be perceived or inferred. Those ways are shown by Vedas. Like Newton's third law, it can only be verified. It cannot be validated because to win an election, there are several methods. Veda prescribes a method to perform a yaga to Vayu, to the Vayu Devata, along with his vehicle, Niyut. Then you will win the election. Vajape Niyutpata alabheta gramakamo bhayurva ima prajana syotane niyate vayumevar yutpan tagdasvena bhagade yeno padhavati sayevasmaihi prajana syotani yachati gramyeva bhavati. You will win the election. Nobody knows it. These are the ways shown by Vedas. In those days, they followed with full faith. Even in Brahma Sutra, the third sutra, Vyasa said, if you accept the Shastras, if you accept the scriptures, then study further. Otherwise, stop here. Shastra Yonitvad in the third sutra. Whereas there are 545 sutras in Brahma Sutra and all great exponents, etc. Okay, sir. So all truths cannot be validated. Now we come to the next point. Naishur. So everybody knows the movement of a horse in the chessboard. Starting from Laplace was a problem some 350 years back. Take a chessboard, starting from the first cell, crossing all cells exactly once. You must find the tour. So this was answered by Laplace 350 years back, whereas nobody was aware of the fact that Vedanta Deshika has given the solution in his Paduka Sastram Shloka number 929. So he was a Leviathan of literature. So he can narrate a whole story in a single word. Vedanta Deshika was capable of narrating a whole story. Ahalya Shapi Mochanam will give an example just for motivation. Jatagirana Sakala Dhara Jatilana Tapati Makutata Tanatana Patubi Puthatati Bukula Madhugalana Lalita Patanalina Raja Upamrita Nijavritina Jahadupala Tanurchida Paramamuni Vera Yubatinutta. This is one word in Sanskrit literature. So how they can narrate a whole story in a single word. Vedanta Deshika was capable of that. He composed Paduka 1008 slokas of Paduka Sahasram in just 3 hours, less than 3 hours. Now I am quoting only one sloka, sloka number 929. Sthiragasam sadaradhya vihata katatavata satpaduke sarasa maharangaraja padannaya. If you write these 4 lines, this contains 32 syllables. If you write it in one half of the chessboard, starting from the first cell, as the knight moves, he gives a tour following the lines of Rudrata, his predecessor. We find the tour. Not only that, if you collect the syllables along the tour, you get the next sloka 930. See, 2 slokas in one stroke. Sthita samaya rajatvaha gattaramadake gavi duramgasam sannatada sadhyata pakarasara. This was written in a Shila Palaka in Shastra University and unveiled by our ex-election commissioner, previous election Commissioner Dr. Gopal Swami in the year 2010. So, digitalization of Indian scriptures, very, very essential. And application of digital technologies like analytics and artificial intelligence to extract knowledge using the ancient coding systems like Vedic numerical code. There are several coding methods, Aryabhatiya code, Bhuta Sankhya Paddhati, Paniniya code, etc. Those are all very essential, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, that is right. But another broader question that comes out of this discussion again makes us to revisit. Nobody is disputing any of these, but Dr. Sudha Seshe and Professor Varakedi both are aware that in this emerging paradigms of education, which is actually a very, very, very powerful instrument that changes the way in which economies also evolve. So the validation and the experimentation still holds the key. And Dr. Sudha Seshan said that, we are not actually doing any volunteered research. Maybe as a developing country, we have our priorities. And if, we need a multilateral initiative. My question to Dr. Sudha Seshan is, if India needs to partner with other countries that are Asiatic or more resonating with this type of knowledge, who will be our natural partners so that, it can be a multilateral effect?
The first choice would be Japan. Probably after that, it could be any of these Southeast Asian countries. Essentially, the issue is the way ancient Indian knowledge looks at things is almost similar to the way ancient Japanese looked at things.
Can you give some examples?
See, some of these drugs, I would say, some of these drugs, the way we have tried to use them, our ancestors have tried to use them, the same way Japan has tried to use them. The life pattern, the way, say, for example, pardon me for digressing into a little of engineering. It has a health connotation. Now, these days, most of us, for comfort and convenience, we kind of use a flooring, which is very unnatural. We go in for several of these stones, the stones which are made into different kinds of novel material, and we go for that. The reason I say this is there is absolutely no elastic recoiling from the floor, which leads to a newer spectrum of diseases. I had a first-hand experience with this. I was working in an institution where we had an animal house. The animal house was reconstructed because of certain space restrictions. Shastra would know better because you do have a very good animal house in your campus. Now, we rebuilt our animal house, and there was some kind of, thinking process that the animal house should also have the modern kind of flooring that we all use in our residences. 15 days into it, All my sheep developed bow legs. Just 15 days. The reason, no elastic recoil from the floor. And that led to a lot of complications. I say this because we might develop drugs, we might develop treatment modules, but then if our lifestyle is not amenable to what it should be, then the entire thing goes chaotic. So that is why I said the way ancient Japanese looked at things. You use something, but then it should be used in the proper way with a natural inclination. You started right at the beginning of the session saying that should not things go along with nature? Now with COVID, post-COVID times, we understand health is not human priority. We have developed the concept of what is called One Health. One Health, on one side of One Health is the human entity, on the other side is the animal, on the third side of the triangle, the third point of the triangle is that environment. If all these three do not align together, then human health will become zero. So that is why I said if we need to do some health research, our immediate natural partner should be Japan, which tends to think the same way.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Professor Varakeri, the previous sessions in this webinar, we also had this term called phygital education, which was online and physical. So that was more on the delivery part. Now, if I have to just extend the same to this session, ancient versus modern. Now, do you think there is enough space? Because modern education has so much demand today. But then we are also saying that there is so much in our traditions, knowledge. If that were the case, the demand for such education also should have been very, very, very high. But we don't find it when we visit institutions. Now, do you think the time has come to blend both, just as online and physical? Can we have a form of education that blends the best of modern and tradition? What do you say?
Yes, very practical question. As you said, Purana Vitteva Nasadhu Sarvam, Nachapi Kavyam Navamityavadyam. Santah Pariksha Anyatarad Bhajante. This is what Kalidasa said. And we have to conduct Pariksha and test and evaluate, then we have to accept it. In one sense, the word Purana has interesting connotation. It is Purapi Navam. It is ancient, yet it is novel. It is new. The words in Sanskrit have very unique connotation. That is, Pura Navam becomes Purana. Therefore, we can't get it in ancient. Therefore, I call it it is already blended. We need to bring out the best of it. And when you say how to, therefore, I get rid of this term ancient. It is eternal. In one sense, we should call it eternal knowledge. Okay? So knowledge is eternal and it is holistic, as beautifully pointed out by Sudha Madam. And we have really stopped to look at the other parts. Actually, we are one part we are looking at this. We call this is the finest of the fine. No, so we should bring the best of it, and we should add into the modern system. So that modern education means it is the education for life and living. So ancient knowledge adds the meaning to it. That's all I say. Then a very beautiful blending will happen. So values we have to bring, but not exact the narrations. Exact narrations of ancient knowledge system may not be very much suitable to our context. So we should be very flexible in that sense. If we are very hard, bring that exactly and keep here, not possible. Therefore we should bring the essence of it and add into the new models. Therefore I call, recently I started speaking of the Indian thought models. From our ancient shastras, we should not bring the thoughts. we should bring out the thought models. That means that are suitable for the future education. So in that sense, definitely we should blend them, bring the values and add it in the modern education. Therefore, that will be accessible and that will be acceptable also.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We have one last question from the audience that is pointed to Dr. Sudha Seshayan. The question actually is, whoever is asking the question, they're aware that you are an active researcher from a healthcare, medical education point of view, and so you have access to some of the formal resources, journals or whatever they are. And on the other side, you're also very active in the ancient wisdom as well, where the questioner feels that there is very limited access to information other than, existing books in print form, or you own books or have access to traditional libraries. Now, modern education is actually removing barriers so that access to modern forms of knowledge resources is available. Now, is that possible so that access to these type of traditional information can be unbundled and democratized so that it reaches the last mile learner? How can we do that?
It is possible, but only thing is, yes, there is a slight, a small trick there. Much of this information is still lying untouched. It requires efforts from our side, voluntary efforts to bring out all this information. It is not that somebody is hiding it, but then it remains untouched. We need to go seek them, get them out, and democratize them. But for all this, we do require lots of resources, human and monetary resources. Now, I was telling you about the standardization and research model, and you touched upon that. Let me just put a very simple example so that people understand it better. Recent times, when the COVID touched us, we thought of this Kapasura Kudineer. Kapasura Kudineer has 15 components. We're not very sure as to which component is synergistic to the other one and which is antagonistic. There is a possibility good things of two components are kind of, added upon one another. The adverse effects of one could be neutralized by the other. We still do not know exact details. In silico studies have given us some kind of indication, but in silico is only in silico. It is still not on the animal or the human being. The problem, essential problem is, if I need to take out the component, there are about 7 or 8 phytocomponents in each of these 15. If I need to pick out each of the component, standardize it, try what is the synergistic effort, try what is the antagonistic effort, it will take years and it will require lots of resources. We need patience for that. Now, if we can kind of put in that kind of standardization and validation, maybe the first decade would be very tough. We need to be very patient. But then at the end of the first decade, we'll have definitely something more where we can make India not the Vishwaguru of the past, but then the Vishwaguru of the future. But that is where the challenge is. It requires everyone's effort. It requires a consolidated effort. It requires a persistent effort.
Thank you very much, Madam, for ending this session on that positive note and also making a call for a collective effort with patience.
Yes.
For India to re-establish its lost glory. Thank you very much, all the panelists, for spending your valuable time. And I hand over the proceedings to the coordinator, Dr. Selva Bhaskar. I also welcome Dr. Amarendra Pani, Director Research of AAU. We are just about to finish this one-day webinar, and Dr. Selva Bhaskar, kindly take the proceedings. Over to you.
Thank you very much, sir. And we had a wonderful deliberation in this particular session. In fact, ancient India ethos has stood the test of time with rich treasures in various spheres of knowledge, be it medicine or mathematics, science or spirituality, or astronomy or Ayurveda. It stands testimony to the fact that in wisdom lies the solution for all our problems. In fact, we had a wonderful time listening to our renowned panelists about India's leadership position in the past and the fascinating achievements of our ancestors in knowledge creation as well as dissemination. I really thank all our panelists for their time and the kind of deliberations they had. Thank you very much, madam. Thank you very much, professors, for your time. And now I welcome Dr. Amarendra Pari, the Joint Director and Director in charge of Research Division of AIU New Delhi, to propose formal vote of thanks. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Salva Bhaskar, Professor Vaidya Subramaniam, Madam Dr. Sudha Sasayan, and other panelists. I was mesmerized, really. I have no words to tell Dr. Subramaniam. Really, it was one of the marvelous events I have ever seen. Each speaker, the coordinator, the moderators, and all things, they were in very much synchronization, and each point has been very forcefully deliberated. I'm highly impressed and highly happy. Having said so, just let me recapitulate in the beginning when I welcome. I said one thing. I still believe that is very important to be shared with the audience. In fact, any discourse in academic contour and circles have never been regularly discussing these aspects, data and knowledge production. Today, this event, as I said earlier, it has some uniqueness. It has a special significance. And for that matter, this subject, in fact, sporadically being discussed, not in the regular references going. And as I said, in the knowledge era, the data has its own significance, requirement, and the data generation, building, mining, analysis, that makes really the cornerstone of all of our academic and other activities. And having said so, let me just one example, let me give you. Being a social scientist, there is a very popular misconception about data. The scientific community, medical community, engineering community, largely, leaving apart the exceptional standing, largely there is a misperception that data means only the statistical figures, the mathematical numbers, this and that. But let me tell you, being a social scientist, at least, one example, let me give you. Data is some kind of impression. It is not a statistical figure, a mathematical number, nothing that sort of. For a fine arts researcher, for a researcher who is doing research in humanities, you imagine somebody is doing a study on Kalidasa, Kumar Sambhavam. Mother Goddess Parvati is doing tapasya on the mountain top, and Kalidas is giving a description of the beauty of the nature, Mother Goddess, and rain is there. So all kind of things, when a researcher is putting his effort to make a deep diving, make a research into this aspect, I do not think any mathematical number, any data or any statistical figure will work here. So that piece of impression, the way Kalidasa is describing the situation, that has got some uniqueness. That is the data for the researcher who is getting into research in the humanities domain. Similarly, you think about the musician. The musician doesn't speak in numbers, doesn't speak in statistics. It speaks in terms of its notation, tal, lay, rhythm, all these things. And there may be many more things which we are ignorant to talk about. That makes data for them. So data in general, I have published an article on this. It was long before, maybe 10 years before. What constitute to be data, and how the process of data in social science has evolved, revolved, got find, how the connotation of data has been changed. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are sitting at the cusp of harnessing our demographic dividend in the country, and the India is poised, is in the threshold of a mighty revolution. And right after the rolling out of the new education policy, lots of massive reforms are taking place, wherein we do understand, we do realize there is a great importance of data in our system, at least for research purpose, at least for the purpose of carrying forward the cause of higher education, research and creation of knowledge. All these things are very important. And let me really honestly, frankly share my opinion. I have already organized 3 programs out of the series of UNESCO, but this one, undoubtedly, I think I am being on record here, it is being live broadcast. This one is the best one among the other things that have gone. So we need a lot of appreciation for our delegates, especially the speakers. Each speaker needs to be acknowledged, needs to be appreciated for really focusing on details, nitty-gritty of the things, the topic, the theme, sub-theme assigned to them. They have done justice, and really excellent one. Thank you so much. So with this, first of all, on behalf of my organization, Association of Indian Universities, and our partnering organization, Shastra, first of all, I extend a gratefulness. We are grateful indeed to all our speakers and all our participants and all our speakers, especially those who have given us a very good insight that we may capture in the form of a report, which will be utilized for the country paper we have proposed to develop. So first of all, I extend thankfulness to all our speakers. Then of course, Madam Dr. Mittal, me, and our entire AIU officers, those who were involved in the process. We were having this impression that we have chosen a right institution like Shastra, which can do justice to this topic. Therefore, I think we were very right. We were very right, and we were very correct in taking the decision and seeking the help of Shastra University for convening this activity. So hands up to Dr. Subramaniam and Dr. Selva Bhaskar and their team for accomplishing this task with utmost precision, quality, and rigor. So thank you so much, Shastra University. Thank you so much, Professor Vaidya Subramaniam. Thank you so much, Professor Selva Bhaskar and your team, and Madam Sudha Sasan. Really, I'm deeply moved by the last at least session of indigenous knowledge and the points forwarded by you people, and the other panelists also, other sessions, they were quite impressive. We are grateful indeed to all of you. And at last, not at least, from my organization, Dr. Mittal, our Secretary General, and Professor Tiruvasagam, the present president of AIU, they deserve my regards, respect, and gratefulness for giving leadership to the organization, for steering our activities. And at last, I convey my regards and acknowledgement to the staff of my own division, my assistant director, and the other people, those who are in my team to assist me and to coordinate this task. Their contribution is duly acknowledged. And because this session was, the last session was on indigenous knowledge system, and I heard a lot of Vedic shlokas. Really, I can't really express how happy I was listening. So I belong to a Vedic gharana. My father is a Sanskrit Vedic scholar. He's an expert of Veda, Nyaya, Mimamsa. So let me just share you one shloka at the end that usually I do in all my technical lectures and talks. With that, I will conclude this vote of thanks. Nalini dalagata jalamopi taralam, tabata janamati atisaya chapalam. Nalini dalagata jalamopi taralam, tabata janamati atisaya chapalam. Kshanamapi sangati sajanne reka bhavati bhavannave tarane nauka. Do I need to translate? It's a beautiful meaning. Let me translate. Nalini, a leaf of lotus leaf, just floating on a water body, maybe a pond, river, whatsoever, on a water body. It's floating, and the top of that leaf, a small bubble of water, a drop of water is there, and the water of that bubble of water on the lotus leaf is just tilting here and there. And the life of that bubble of water is so fragile, so volatile. At any point of time, it may drop into the water and the life ends there. Exactly like that, human mind, mati, jivan and mati, both are volatile, fragile. At any given point of time, also our life may end and our mind also may choke up working. In such a situation, getting the camaraderie, the companionship, and sitting in a satsang, and having some discourse on knowledge, it helps like a small boat to cross over the ocean of knowledge. With this beautiful Vedic human, and once again saluting all of you and giving big thanks to all of you, I would like to conclude my vote of thanks here. Thank you so much. Jai Hind and Namaskar.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So, Dr. Bhaskar, I think